Welcome back, Hip Politics family. It's your boy Cameron Trimble, aka Mr. Cameron Calvin, aka Mr. Hip Politics, BKA the political rock star out here in DC. We got another wonderful episode this afternoon, evening, morning, noon, or night, whenever you decide to listen to this pod. Another great guest today. Special affinity for this brother. Been watching his work for years, probably even more than when I really went back and looked at his filmography, or I noticed, I was like, oh, I forgot he was in that. I remember him in this, but I forgot he was in that. But we don't do just interviews or these aren't interviews, these are just conversations. But we don't do conversations with people just because they're famous or just because they did something cool or entertainment, music. It's more, we really are trying to dig into those who are using their platform and their voice for something bigger than themselves. And he's an embodiment of that. And you know why? Because he went to Howard University.
HU.
If the Hip Politics family can please welcome to the pod, to Hip Politics today, esteemed award-winning actor, producer, because I know he has a production company.
Yes, sir.
But also former marketer, financier, and I would say probably the biggest Afro-Cuban actor in the business. Can I say that?
I'm working on it.
Welcome to the show, Laz Alonso.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's an honor, especially the fact that not only is the topic that you cover two of my favorite topics, but you've brought them into one and really fused it with our culture. So I think that it's a great backdrop to address both, because it really is, our culture really has a voice that I think now more than ever is really being vocalized unapologetically.
I think it is being vocalized, and that's the point. We're trying to turn up the volume.
Yep.
We're going into a crazy election year, but it's not just about next year. It's about every year, probably every month. You literally voting every day.
100%.
Something I heard Kevin Lyle say recently. He said, we don't just got to wait every 4 years or even every 2 years to vote. You vote every day. You vote with your dollars. You vote with your attention. You vote where you decide to show up and what you decide to speak on. Like, you're micro voting every day. So we got to turn up the volume.
That's true. And then when you look at social media and a lot of the blog sites, they cover politics just as much as they cover who was caught dating who and who was at what restaurant. All of a sudden you'll see posts about either the president or a wannabe president or a former president, and the comments are always on fire. People are engaged a lot more than I feel I can ever remember people being engaged before.
So I want to kick this conversation off with an important question, something we like to ask all of our... Hold on a second. Did you turn it off? Yes, because I can hear it. I didn't hear you when we did the other one. We'll just keep rolling.
Yeah.
We'll cut in that.
Go.
I want to kick off the conversation with something we like to ask all our guests. How has hip-hop shaped you?
So I'm a little older than you.
You can't tell.
Hip-hop, for me, it really created my identity as a young adult, because when I was growing up, I was breakdancing as a teen.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. New Edition at that time, they were popping and locking, and Bobby Brown was popping and locking. Everybody was popping and locking. And
that's one of the four pillars of hip-hop I think people often forget, next to graffiti, the MC, and the DJ.
Yep, the dance. And I would even say fashion is a pillar of hip-hop that, you know, even though it's not established as one of them, it really is, because that you can look at somebody and tell if they're hip-hop without them having to open their mouths, just by how they're dressed, just by how they present themselves to the world, through their clothes, through their jewelry. Deion Sanders is hip-hop. And that's just how he rocks his hoodie and his sunglasses and his hat and his swag and his gold chain.
And then once he opens his mouth, you know he hip-hop.
Hip-hop all day. So when I was growing up, I grew up in an era where hip-hop was really growing up as well. It was developing itself. Hip-hop was a youth in and of itself. And I feel like I was able to grow up with hip-hop as it grew up. Hip-hop just celebrated its 50th. I'm knocking on that door soon. And a lot of the eras that hip-hop has experienced, I can tell you exactly where I was in my life based on that era. So there was a LL Cool J era where that was my favorite rapper. That's when I was a teen, a young preteen, trying to figure out who I was as a young man and who I was gonna be as a man. And so I'm bad. Mama said knock you out. That type of hip hop was defining my attitude to the world. And it was also my shield and my sword in a city at the time. I was growing up in DC, born and raised, when it was the crack era, and where you had to either fight or run real fast in order to survive in the city. And sometimes you fought and sometimes you ran. But the key was to be able to live to tell about it. And I have a lot of friends who we still get together to this day that we grew up during that era that live to tell about it. And sadly, I probably have just as many friends who didn't make it to live to tell about it. And every kind of era, I had an Eric B. and Rakim era where it was starting to develop my knowledge of self and where I started to become a little more prayerful and a little more spiritual. At that time, one of my best friends that I went to high school with became a Muslim. And then it moved into the PE, Public Enemy era. When you start learning about self-destruction, you start learning about fight the power and all of the different ways in which the black man is getting attacked. You start listening to reading Message to the Black Man and all this stuff. But every era had a movement. And then we moved into NWA era, where NWA all of a sudden now is F the police and stories that were explaining what we were seeing in those streets. You talk about the 88, 89 crime bill. We were seeing that. We were living that. Kids getting shot for no reason. There was a moment in DC I remember where if you made eye contact with somebody, it was an instant challenge.
Dang.
Yeah. And if you stepped on somebody's shoes, you better be ready to square up. Scuff somebody's shoes. Even if you didn't scuff them, if you just rub it at the grocery store, it could turn into something. So it was a very aggressive time that we were living in during that era. And then it moved into Das Effects and Tribe Called Quest. It turned into love and fun hip hop. Biz Markie, Just a Friend. It turned into silly hip hop. Now all of a sudden, cats is with Kwame. Cats is wearing polka dots. And cats got Gumby fades. And cats are dancing. And so now hip hop went from angry, aggressive, killing each other to dancing and having fun. And that was when I was at Howard. You know what I'm saying?
I was trying to figure, okay.
And so there were different eras that defined my life. And based on an era where I listened to the artist or the music or the vibe or the feeling, then from there we went to Mary J. Blige and Biggie Smalls and all that, 90s hip hop. You know? And then from that we went into, so every era had like its sound, its dress, but it also had its attitude.
And you were reflected. Did it shape you in a way where you were reflecting each of those pieces?
100%. It affected my life at that time based on hip hop is almost journalism because
they always say it's CNN of the streets.
It's CNN of the streets. The sound depicts how happy or how rough those times were too. And so as hip hop evolved, we all were evolving at that time, and our voice changed based on the music at that time. Some of it hip hop led the charge, and some of it hip hop reflected it. So at different times, hip hop was more on the receiving end of what was happening, and at certain times, hip hop was driving what was gonna come next.
You touched on being DC born and raised, but you're first generation Cuban American, correct?
First generation meaning I was born and raised in DC, but my parents immigrated to the United States.
Did they come straight to DC or did they stop in Florida and then?
They never did Florida. Yeah, that's another misnomer that a lot of people feel like every Cuban lived in Florida. Most Cubans ended up in Florida. But back in the day, man, New York, the Bronx wasn't Puerto Rican or Dominican. The Bronx was Cuban. Jersey wasn't any other Latin culture. It was all Cuban. Jersey and New York were probably as Cuban as Miami was at one time. People don't know that, yeah. And the thing is, Latin groups have always immigrated to this country in waves. So as the different groups stop immigrating, another group will come. So like after the Cubans, the Puerto Ricans came, and then they became the dominant culture. And then Once they stopped coming in big numbers, the Dominicans came.
came.
Yeah. And then they became the dominant culture. Since then, we've had other dominant cultures. If you look around here in D.C., El Salvadorian is a very big number when it comes to, when you look at Latin as a demographic, the majority of them are from El Salvador. They're the dominant culture. But in Miami, for the last few years, it hasn't been Cubans who've been immigrating to the States. It's been Venezuelans, and they've been political exiles. It's constantly changing. It's constantly evolving, just like we have Chinatown and Thai Town and Little Ethiopia. It really just reflects group of immigrants that come to this country. They set up shop. They open up their grocery stores, their laundromats, their infrastructure so that they have a home away from home. But as they have kids, their kids end up growing up and moving out. They don't necessarily need to eat their food every single night. They want to go to STK and the Ruth Chris, and because they grew up in this country as Americans.
And so idolizing the American food, or
incorporating
that into their...
Exactly. I don't really eat Cuban. I live in L.A. My family is here in D.C. I only eat Cuban food when I come home. In L.A., I don't eat Cuban food because I'm not going to get authentic Cuban food. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to have the tourist version.
Nah, I got it.
I can't do it. So
not when you come from it.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like when you're used to your grandma making a certain dish, and now you go get it at a fast food joint. It's never going to be the same.
So that's interesting, because you chose Howard University, but you lived here. You were born and raised here. So sometimes that's an easy transition because, hey, it's down the block, it's down the street, it's another part of town, it's uptown, downtown, depending on where you grew up. What part of D.C. did you grow up in?
I grew up uptown.
Okay.
Yeah.
Growing for those uptown, the listeners, that's northwest D.C. Could mean a lot of different things depending on who you're talking to. Uptown, but so that means D.C. But Howard's also part of uptown.
It is part of uptown.
It's uptown. So that could either breed familiarity where, I definitely want to go there, or I know a lot of folks from D.C. and like, I've seen Howard my whole life. I wanted to go somewhere else. But that extra layer of being Afro-Latino, being Afro-Cuban, like, how did you connect and see what brought you to choose Howard? Was it your first choice? I think most African Americans or folks who go to Howard, at least through my eyes, are either African American, but also you got a lot. We also have a ton of Caribbean immigrants from all over the diaspora there, as well as Africa that come. But like I said, I came a little bit after you, and I think I'm curious to, like, what was that model? What was that role model? What did you see that was like, you know what, I need to go there?
You know what, man? For me, I grew up very compartmentalized. To me, I was only Cuban at home. From the minute I left my house, once I stepped one foot outside the door, I felt like I was African American. I didn't feel like I was Cuban anymore until I went back home. At home, we only speak Spanish. We don't speak English at home. The food that we cook at home is Cuban food. We drink coffee every morning. When the TV is on, if my mom is watching TV, she's watching Spanish television. But the minute I stepped foot outside my door, I was no longer Cuban. I was black. I was a black man in D.C. I was a black man in America. And most of my friends didn't even know I was Latin. Yeah, nobody knew until they would come over to the house. And my mom, who's a dark-skinned black woman, who you would really not even guess she has any type of Latin in her, the minute she opens her mouth, it's like, oh, snap, like, what just happened? She speaks very broken English, and when she rattles off in Spanish, it's just like anybody else. I never really saw myself any different than anybody else that was in my school. I went to African-American elementary school, African-American high school, and when I was looking at where I wanted to go to university, I wanted to go to the absolute best school for African-Americans. To me, that was what would make me among the best. And when I look at who attended Howard, and I looked at the list of people that graduated from Howard, to me it seemed like it was a factory of black excellence. And I didn't know what it was that Howard was doing on that campus. But whatever they were doing, they were producing some of the most famous black people.
A lot of fields.
Yeah. Back then I applied to Howard for pre-med.
Me too. I was pre-med.
Yep.
You know why? Howard, I don't know if it is right now, but for 20 years was number 1, 2, or 3 in putting black people in usually 1 or 2. Some I
medical
think did
school.
Into medical school.
And Howard Hospital had a ridiculous reputation.
It's one of the only, I think there's only one other HBCU that even has a hospital attached to it.
Exactly. So for me, that was what I thought I wanted to do. And then once I got to Howard, I realized that, no, I want to go into business. That's really what I would enjoy doing. So when I saw how easy it was to transfer, I said, oh, it's a no-brainer. I transferred like maybe week 1 or week 2. I was out, and I got in School of B. But yeah, for me, it was always about what's going to set me up better than anywhere else for the rest of my life. And to me, it was Howard. If you are a person of color and you graduate from Howard, you will be successful. That's how I looked at it back then. So I was like, it's a no-brainer for me. I didn't even consider any other schools. And there were other schools, of course, that seemed cool at the time, but I was like, man, this is the one. And I'm glad I did, because I really feel like Howard has something that you can qualify or quantify on paper.
A je ne sais quoi.
It is a je ne sais quoi. It is something that we all achieve once we're there, that when we leave that school, there is a certain chip on our shoulder, and it's not an elitist chip. It's not in no way thinking I'm better than this person or that person. It is, I will not lose. I will not lose. I will not fail. This is what I need to do. I'm going to do it. And at some point throughout my 4 years at Howard, I acquired that. And that's what I went there to find. I still can't tell you when it was or what it was that gave it to me, but there is a certain magic that exists on that campus that I highly encourage all my friends now who have kids that are about to graduate, and they always talk to me about Howard, and they want me to talk to their kids about Howard. And I make sure to always upsell, because, besides what they can quantify on paper, there's something that you just cannot. And that's Howard's magic.
It's funny you mentioned that. Howard was actually like my 4th or 5th choice. And God, I'm a man of faith. My dad's a United Methodist bishop now, but his older brother was a professor there, and my first cousin was there. And I was like, I don't want to go. Uncle John about to be watching me. But it worked out. God works in mysterious ways. Like, I got in all the other schools, but they were the school that gave me a full ride. I was an avid guy. Full ride plus a stipend.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what it was.
Yeah.
And you know what the stipend was? $750 a semester.
Amen.
In my mind,
that's
I'm
a lot
like,
of bread.
I'm about to ball out.
Yeah,
like
that's a lot of bread.
At 7 in high school, I get an extra $750 after my books.
You rich. You rich in college with that.
But it turned out to be the best decision, and you're definitely right. And I'm always an upseller too of it. Whenever somebody is, I've made it. I'm pointed every point in my career, Capitol Hill, to the firms I've been, black spaces, white spaces, always consistently making sure our internship program has at least a Howard person every there. So I've always had a Howard intern, making sure we are creating relationships with the school. I'm on the board of visitors now for Chadwick A. Boseman College of Fine Arts under Dean Felicia Rashad. So I'm 10 toes down Howard in belief, but I'm also an even bigger fan of just HBCUs as a whole.
Same.
While I love mine, the jokes, and you get a little friendly, familial.
Yeah. Who the real HU is and all that
stuff. But that's all in love, but embracing what HBCUs as a whole and what they've done for our community. But it's like I said, I was always curious when folks who were not just not traditional, but African American, but come from the diaspora, come from the Caribbean, or come from the continent, or come from other places in the world, what they saw.
What the funny thing is, man, I love that about Howard too, is that once you get on that campus, you really realize how similar we all are. I met black folks from St. Croix, St. Vincent, all these Virgin Islands, all these countries in Africa, all of these, just so many black people from all over the world that I had no exposure to being from D.C. D.C., it was like you were either from Northwest, Northeast, Southwest, or Southeast. And now all of a sudden, you're surrounded by black people, not just from other states, but from other countries. And it just really solidified how we're not a minority. And you grow up thinking that because you hear it for so long, and you even hear that Howard is a school for minorities. And then once you get there, you're like, man, ain't nowhere in the world we're a minority.
No.
That is the
when
biggest
people always
lie.
say it's not the real world, I'm like, believe me, when you get there's so many variations of black people. I felt, I came from, like I said, I grew up in the Midwest, Cleveland. I knew one or two types of black people. And then you get there, like, all the states,
Right.
all the things I'm learning in real time. I'm like, there's so much just to learn about our people around the world that I'm like, had I gone to a PWI or somewhere else, I wouldn't even know if I would have had a chance. Like, I'm still soaking up game about what it means to be Jamaican and
Yep.
having, you know what I mean, what it means to be Nigerian
Yep.
or come from Cameroon and things of that nature. But I want to pull on a thread there, connect to another part of your career and your platform. You said you were imbued with that we cannot lose. That Howard and I'm pretty sure it also coming from when I think about I've heard other interviews and other discussions you've had, but knowing that immigrant work ethic, and I'm pretty sure am I wrong in saying your family probably poured a lot in to make sure you were the one that went to college and succeeded?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I almost felt like I really didn't have a choice. I am the first in my family to graduate from college.
Oh, congratulations.
And thank you. And now my cousin, she just came up and just dunked all over my records. Like, she's got her master's, and now she's at Howard getting her doctorate degree.
Okay.
We're the next generation from our family, but we're the first generation that have collegiate degree, and she now has advanced degrees as well. But yeah, man, for us, it was very important to do that. It was my goal because my family, everybody chipped in to send me to college.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Everybody put in. It wasn't like my mom did it on her own. She couldn't have done it by her own. I worked all throughout college. I didn't have the GPA to get a scholarship. So I worked. I had a job from freshman year all the way to senior year. And I was an RA. So I was getting free housing plus a little bit of a stipend because I was an RA, as well as I had a part-time job with the federal government. I worked at a Department of Operations Management, I think it was. Stay-in-school program. I did that. And on top of that, I had a bunch of side hustles, man. I was an entrepreneur during college, man. During Valentine's Day, I sold roses and balloons, deliveries. During Halloween, I sold candy. I sold everything that was legal. Nothing illegal.
But how would it give you that hustle?
Yeah, I had to hustle.
You had that hustle.
Yeah.
And you said you wouldn't lose, and when I look at what people know you as an actor, and probably a lot of your work in front of the camera, you've been part of some of the biggest franchises, Avatar, Fast and Furious. You had a memorable. That's actually when I found out who you were.
Okay.
In that Fast and Furious movie.
Okay.
When somebody, like I said,
I always brag and say, we were the Fast and Furious that saved the franchise.
Oh yeah,
that franchise was done.
It's not Fast 5. It was the Fast. It was the
Fast
Part 4.
Yeah,
it was Fast 4.
That's when Vin Diesel came back. I was the arch nemesis. We saved it.
Yeah, and somebody was like, "Oh, you know the main villain." I was like, "Who, the Latino guy?" Yeah. Oh yeah, he from Howard.
Yeah.
Somebody, I was like, he black.
Damn black.
Yeah, right, exactly. This is years ago. I'm a lot younger and thinking about it, but that's when I started just like tuning into your career, because like I said, if you're from the school, I'm repping and paying attention.
Yeah.
But
in your defense, I take pride in people not being able to recognize me from movie to movie. That's something that I made sure that I changed as a chameleon so much from role to role that if you saw the same person in each movie, then I was failing as an actor. See, I'm from a school that if you're not convincing me you're a different human being in every role, then you ain't acting. You just memorizing lines, but you're not doing no work. I shouldn't be the same person in Stomp the Yard that I was in This Christmas, that I was in Fast and Furious, that I was in Avatar, that I am on The Boys, that I was in Jumping a Broom. I should be a different human being. I should look different. I should wear my hair, my facial hair. I should have a different weight. I should comb it different. I should speak differently. I should articulate. I should have different gestures. That's acting. If all you're doing is just playing yourself and just saying different words, that ain't acting to me. That's when I judge before, because people always say, who is your favorite actor? I'm like, I don't go based on actors. I go based on performances. Because everybody can have a brilliant performance, and you're like, whoa, like that person blows you away. That might not necessarily, their body of work may not be brilliant,
that performance.
It's like they found something.
It made you believe.
Oh my gosh. And they moved you either to tears or inspired you. And some people have more than one of those, and those are the greats. The ones that have more than one of those, then it's okay.
You're one of the ones. You're one of those ones.
I'm working on it. I'm still trying to find that one performance that is going to blow everybody's mind. I don't feel that I've done it yet. That one performance that's just gonna make people just lose it.
I got it.
But what I do take pride in is that every performance has been completely and categorically different. The performance that I gave you in Miracle at St. Anna with Spike Lee is going to be night and day from the performance that I did in Jarhead. They were both military. They were both war movies, but they were different characters. And they were both Afro-Latin characters. Because Spike casted me to be Afro-Puerto Rican, and in Jarhead I was Afro-Cuban. But I got to give you something different. You can't see a repeat performance. If you see a repeat performance, I didn't do my job.
And to that point is that casing just through those roles and through, like you said, taking it so seriously to really embody different gestures, embody different looks, embody different dialect or different,
Even
just
different
speak
politics.
embody that and showing that on screen, which just shows, I think, that the complexity of just the Cuban culture or the Afro-Cuban culture, because people may think, oh, that's just one kind of group. No, there's so much. There's the richness within that small pocket. Not won't say even small, just in that pocket of a community. And I think with so much, with we kind of being a celebrity entertainment obsessed world now, with so much even more content coming out, those examples and those roles on screen kind of shape so many different people. I think it's going to even shape people even more moving forward because they're content all the time. I still grew up with a rotating phone, like one phone line in the house. I didn't get a cell phone. I was in college, and that was normal until I was my junior senior year. And now people are getting them. My niece got one. She's 5.
Yeah, no. When we were coming up, if you had a cell phone, you were a doctor or a drug dealer. That's it. You weren't just carrying a cell.
But I say that to say is that when you said you would not lose, and it took you multiple steps. I know you worked in Wall Street. You worked at Nike. You were a marketing guru and throwing parties and doing really influencer marketing with liquor brands in the entertainment industry, doing all these different things.
You really did do your homework.
Doing all these different things. So, yeah, I heard the story of the Biggie party, being a part of some of those huge moments. But doing all of those things, knowing you weren't going to lose, that eventually led you here to your passion. Talk to me about that resiliency, because I think this is hip politics, focusing on what our culture, with hip hop culture and generation, how to really mobilize them. And I think one of the tenets and one of the things that, no matter the type of hip hop we're talking about, is the resiliency, is the knock me down 9, like Cardi B song, get back up 10, get back up 10. Like, you knock me down 9 times, I'm giving back up 10. Talk to me about the resiliency to stay focused or to have a dream God put on your heart that you following, and what that was like to get there.
I think that's probably what, in my opinion, what I think is one of the most important lessons that I find is important for me to share, because people only see the success of our business, but they don't see the failures. If you Google my filmography and you go on IMDb Pro and you look up movies that I've done, you're going to see a long list.
67.
Now, for every one credit that you see, I probably did not get 10 roles, 5 to 10 roles for every one that I got. Could be, in some cases, depending on the year, 15, 20. So people only see the yeses, but they don't see the no's. And there are more no's in our business than there are yeses. So you have to, at some point, and it's not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight, to learn how to take the no's and not take it personal. Not let the no define you, but to be able to just accept it and move on. And in the very beginning of your career, it's tough, man. It's really hard because you really need that yes. You need that yes to be able to make it to next month, to be able to pay that car note or to pay that bill or to pay that water bill, that light bill. You're like, you start seeing that account dwindle, and that's really why we are striking as a union, is because the opportunities that I had coming up, they're trying to take them away from the next generation of actors. And there's no way the next generation of actors are going to be able to survive if they don't have things like residual payments. There were times when I didn't work for months, and those little residual checks, I know right now people are posting how little they are. Guess what? They're a lot bigger when you first do the job, They just over time get smaller and smaller because they play that episode less and less, and it has less value the older the show is. But at one time, those residual checks were enough to cover car insurance or gas or a car note. It wasn't always 88 cents. When you first did it and you get your first residual check, it's usually, who knows, but it's a lot more than that. And so we're fighting for substantive payments that allow everyone who participates in this business to share in the revenue of what they contributed to. And at one time in Hollywood, there was a strike so that we could get health insurance. At one time, actors didn't get health insurance. You had to strike to get health insurance. At one time, actors didn't get pensions when they retire. They would just turn old and then have to figure it out.
Hopefully they saved enough money.
Hopefully,
if they made enough money.
If they made enough money. But 88% of our union does not get paid more than $26,000 a year. 88%. So what do they have to look forward to? And so what we're striking for is, I hate to use the word equity because equity almost sounds slightly entitled. It is just fair. It's just fairness.
There's no rights in this country. There's no progress in this country that is given.
Exactly. 100%.
It's all
100%.
If you ever hear the word power is not given, it's taken. Or power is not given, it's fought for.
It's fought for.
It's earned.
It's earned. They will not give you a penny, anything.
You always hear that you don't get what you're worth, you get
what you negotiate. Even residual payments. Ronald Reagan led the SAG union on a strike back in 1969, I think, so that we would have residual payments. And the reason why I bring him up is because at the time he was president of SAG. But the point is everything that we have now that we're fighting to keep, that they're trying to take, we had to strike to get. And now they're trying to strip it from us. And it is a matter of life and death. Seriously.
And with technology, like I said, I'm a digital guy, so I'm all in terms of understanding and finding ways to utilize responsibly and ethically, but generative AI across multiple industries. And just like when the internet came and streaming platforms came, technology is going to change.
100%. And I'm sure that AI, probably there are ways to utilize it in partnership with what we do to elevate the business. But to replace, I think that's where we're starting to tread on really fine territory, because guess what? It might replace us today, but it's also threatening to replace lawyers. It's threatening to replace accountants. It's threatening to replace marketers. It's threatening to replace a lot of people besides actors and writers. It's threatening to replace a lot of people besides actors and writers, including the lawyers that are arguing in favor of AI. Guess what? In 3 years or in 10 years when we renegotiate again, we might not need those lawyers anymore because the AI might be the one doing the negotiating at the speed in which the AI is moving. So we really need to pump the brakes, and we really need to figure this thing out on how to use it as a tool, ethically as a tool. And I think that there's a lot that needs to be. I think the technology is moving faster than the legal minds in charge of regulating it.
I think it's the legal minds and the political minds. We're still regulating the internet and social media based off of rules written decades ago.
From MySpace.
Yeah, MySpace, written for telecom in the 60s and 70s. Government and government and laws just usually just don't move at the speed of technology or speed of culture.
Right. I
think that's just it's an unfortunate.
You know what I'm really offended by?
Tell me.
And I don't know. I haven't heard Drake comment on this at all. But this is hip politics, so I think it's appropriate. The fact that Drake, there's a song that's nominated for a Grammy that Drake didn't even do. Does he win the Grammy, or does the person that did that song win the Grammy? I don't know. But they used
that Drake weekend, some Grammy, yeah.
They used their voices. How is that even ethical?
Why are we? I would, even at the very least, why would something like the Grammys, a human entity?
Yeah, validate that.
Yeah, exactly. It's one thing for it to live on the internet and play around, but it's another thing for us to say, you know what, that deserves an award.
Right.
Let me shine a light on that.
And if Drake and The Weeknd did it, that's different. If they together, that's different. But if some guy in his basement did that in their voices and used their voice, which to me, that's their IP. Their voice, their flow, what makes them who they are, what makes them artists, that's their IP.
I would say I applaud actors, SAG, Screen Actors Guild, WGA, Writers Guild of America, and then also the UAW. You all are striking at a time and leading the forefront. Like my industry, comms, marketing, like we don't really have many unions. There's some unions, but there's not a strong industry-wide union presence. I'm just not part of one of those industries. But
Gotcha.
you all are at that forefront, and I think unions have been demonized for so long, probably to reduce the power of the worker over time. But the community that it is and those rights, like you said, that we've fought for decades, years, for you all to be at the forefront of this, I just want to continue to hope. I'm glad you mentioned that stat about how many actors are making less than what, $26,000 or $28,000 a year, just so people can see themselves in that and understand these issues. Because I think some of the rules that are written, rules of the road that are written in these very front-facing industries, like UAW is one of the biggest unions. Period.
Yep.
United Auto Workers Union, they're striking. Some of the things there around automation and jobs and leaving. Cheaper labor. I just really hope we learn something from it. But I'm also, like I said, I'd be lying to you if I told you I'm like I'm a tech geek a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm a digital guy, so
Me, listen,
it's
too.
coming.
It's coming.
It's coming. It's gonna come here faster than we have rules of the road. But I just hope we all focus on correcting those as they come. Like when you see the internet exploded before we could create some guardrails. I think right now, as AI is right there, we're still just finally shaping the rules of the road around social media.
I just wish AI, whoever is responsible for creating this AI, and there are many different entities, it's almost like the space race. You got Google, you got Meta, everybody's racing to make the best AI. I wish they'd be focused on who can make the best AI to cure cancer, who can make the best AI to cure diabetes, to
Get
cure
all that computing power to.
Yeah, why are they rushing to get the best AI to replace a writer or replace an actor? Why not cure cancer? Why not cure blindness or create a new hearing device? If the AI is that revolutionary of a technology that can change human history, why not use it to fix problems that have been plaguing us?
No, you're right. I would say this is that I think there's what we see out here, and ChatGPT put it on Front Street, but we've had it. We had versions of AI for years, decades. It's now public facing. But to put a point on that, but pull on another thread that you mentioned there, I think there may be that is maybe happening. It's not as front facing.
I hope so.
But a question I have, hearing you talk about this, like I said, I've heard on other platforms talk about your heritage and talk about the representation that you give. You've got a strong voice. You could easily, I don't know how much you're getting, but you was in Avatar. You was in Fast and Furious. You were in Fast and Furious. One of my favorite shows, The Boys.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much.
I'm a comic book. Grew up on the comic book. I didn't grow up on that comic book, but I'm a comic book guy, and I like a little ultra violence every now and then.
Okay.
And then your character is quite interesting, actually.
Yeah.
But many of those things, I say all those things, like you're a success story.
Thank you.
You're a success story in probably one of the hardest industries to actually be a success story. Because everybody watches TV or looks at some content like, I could do that. Especially now with phones, and you can make content easier, and they think, oh, I could do that. But to break through, not just make a living, but make a thriving is so tough. So you could just do that and go home. You could do that and go live your life. But you chose a lot of different ways, and it's not like I just saw an interview from a few months ago. I just watched the interview you did 9 years ago talking about your heritage, talking about being a voice, being there. And I'm curious to where that came from and where you hope to push it in terms of everything outside of in front of the camera. I know you got a production, I forgot the name, but I know you have a production company, so I don't know if that means one of your vehicles may be what you decide to produce and put out there and create roles and stories that you want to tell. But even as you teach, as you give back to Howard, as you give back to other places, like, where do you think you are going to go as you move into this next part of your career? Because like I said, you're extremely opinionated, obviously very well spoken, very well. You're thinking through what you're trying to accomplish, and it ain't new. Like I said, at least doing my research, it wasn't new. So I'm curious to, like, what's the next step as it relates to, like I said, outside of just what you put on film?
Sure. I really want to create content at this stage of my life. And when I say content, I still want to focus on film and television, but from another perspective. Before, my creative juices were always in front of the camera and finding roles that spoke to me, finding roles that I believe represented Black people and Black men in a positive light, or if it wasn't necessarily in a positive light, how can I portray this character in a way with humanity?
Hip politics, baby.